Please welcome back Julia Murat. The stars of the film, Raquel Caro and Rodrigo Bolzan, and the co-writer Matias Mariani. I'd like to begin by asking about the writing of the film. As you alluded to in your introduction, it's been several years since you made a film. Naturally, I was curious about the origins of this story, and but also I'd like to hear about the decision or the motivation behind the decision to structure it in the four parts.
Well, the origin of the story comes from many different things. Me and Matias, who is the scriptwriter and also my husband, were just starting the relationship on the beginning of 2011, end of 2010, when I was just finishing my last film, Fond Memory, and I was basically thinking about love a lot. So this was in my mind all the time, and the fact that on the beginning of our relationship, because we come from very different backgrounds, so we kind of tried also to always not to touch some subjects, to be sure that we're not going to talk about bad things and to protect our relationships. So I was always thinking about how is a relationship based on silence, based on something that I do not say. At the same time, there is a more conceptual origin, which is Marina Abramovic and Ulay piece called Rest Energy. It's a piece that they go one in front of the other, getting a bow and an arrow, and the arrow is pointed to her heart, and they are like balancing each other through the bow. So basically they cannot make a big movement, because if they do, the arrow is going to hurt her. And for me, it was a very beautiful way of seeing love. So from both things, I think we started writing the script. The four parts, I think we got, like, it was not in the first treatment, but probably the second or third one. It was almost from the beginning, because we felt, I believe it was that, we felt that since the film is very daily life, it was difficult to show that actually there was a time that had passed. It was especially difficult in the script, because here at least you have the sculptures getting in the image. So I think we came with the idea of the parts a bit because of that, like to divide the film and to give more moments that we could like show the time had passed. Você quer acrescentar? Do you want to add something?
I think that the division itself, the way we work together, me and Julia, is that I usually open up the scenes, and Julia is very keen at positioning them and kind of also understanding what the structural role of each scene. That's something that Julia does very well, and that's the way we work is more or less like that. So I think right after we opened up the first treatment, I think you just kind of organized the scenes in such a way that it made sense that there was 4 different blocks, and I think that was kind of a little kind of insight on the story that really took care. And before that first version, she used to go out looking for the cable and kind of following it around the city. We had all those scenes, and those scenes kind of separated each block originally. And And then we had this great guy called Michel Machowski, who was our consultant. And one day we had a Skype call with him, and he just looked at it and said, "Guys, you're being cowards. You need to take this out. You really need to do the whole film inside the place. It's about that. It's about their confinement. It's about how they relate to themselves and to that space. So you shouldn't get out until the very ending." And that's why those scenes ended up not being part of the film.
I'd like to pull the actors in for this one. The characterization of the two lead roles is so rich and so they embody the roles so completely. So of course I would love to hear you talk about the casting, and then maybe the three of you could just speak about your collaboration, sort of figuring out who these characters are and how they behave.
That was a huge part of the film, I think. We started casting the film like more than 1 year before we actually shot. So basically they got in the film 1 year before we shot. And Raquel actually worked almost during 1 year. She was like always preparing herself physically in the beginning, but then we had like many different months trying to create the dance, because the process we made, and let's talk about the characters, we kind of decided that the performance art, the dance, the sculpture, and the film were actually 3 different pieces that we needed to develop from the beginning to the end. Like, we actually need to think about an exposition, a piece, and the film itself. So we develop everything for that. We developed for the sculpture, for the exposition, and we developed the dance part for a piece theater. So actually it took like 3 months of preparation for the piece theater. And I was always there looking how it would fit in the film. And we had the choreographer looking for the choreography itself, like how it would fit on the theater. And we mixed both images, I think. So I think the casting was always, especially for Raquel, because for me it was I was quite sure that I needed a dancer more than I needed an actress. And I started just looking for dancers. And Raquel is not exactly a dancer. I mean, she came from circles. And with her, I realized that how important the dramaturgy of the film was, because I understood that actually on the very end, the film were more a film than a dance theater. So she kind of teach me during the whole rehearsal, and especially during the tests, that I actually needed someone who was able to really act. Fala de vocês. Can you talk a little bit about the process and the characters itself?
I'm gonna ask some help to Matthias with my English. I'm sorry. Na verdade, eu sinto que o filme propõe um encontro entre artistas que vivem e trabalham, e o exercício proposto para a gente foi um pouco esse.
I believe the film proposes an encounter between artists that live and work together, and that's what was expected from us.
Então, o nosso processo, de alguma maneira, reproduziu o encontro de 2 artistas que, no caso, não se conheciam.
So our process really kind of was to go through this encounter. We didn't know each other.
Com as descobertas, o frescor que há nisso, mas ao mesmo tempo, como nós ensaiamos 7 semanas, nesse microcosmo a gente pôde desenvolver também um processo de intimidade que teve que se aprofundar durante as filmagens.
all the discovery and freshness that comes with those kind of encounters. But at the same time, since it was 7 weeks of shooting, we ended up being able to work on and grow an actual intimacy between ourselves that was very useful for the shooting.
I don't know. Acho que é isso.
For myself, it's nice this that you bring the approach of the intimacy of the characters as being built because we didn't know each other before started the rehearsals, and I had all this preparation like a year before for the dance part, and I took advantage of all this time to also like start to get closer to this woman, and when I started getting prepared, I had my son was 4 months, so I had to really get back on shape and all these, and so many thoughts that Alice, many fears that Alice can have about having a baby or how is going to be her career after that. I was facing that moment in real life, and I almost nowadays I want to tell her that it's possible. Not easy, but possible. And yeah, I guess also like it was my first movie, and as I was getting to his place, also the awkwardness of the set helped me also to get in that place in a sense that it wasn't my place. I needed to find my space in there as an actress and as the character was doing it. So
I'd just like to add that we tried to shoot. We didn't do it completely, but we tried to shoot chronologically, so that's also helped.
yeah.
In the same space, in the real space, all the time.
Yeah.
Almost all the time.
Naturally, I want to ask about the space. It's perhaps a cliche to say that the setting is a character in the film, but okay, the setting is a character in the film. Could you talk a bit about finding the location, but also I guess you could all talk about your relationship with the space.
It was a mess. No, really. I mean, the space is a building, as you see on the last scene, that is completely abandoned for 30 years. So basically, it has like dusty, just big, really. It was like really impossible to be there without feeling like I do not belong here. But we had tried a lot to clean everything up. We did clean two entire floors, but still, since it was 4th floor, all the dusty that were on the floor over us came to us. So every day it was like very difficult to clean it again and to try to fulfill it with some warmth. And that on the last week of preparation, I was completely hysterical, thinking that it was definitely a bad decision. We would never be able to be there and to feel like it was a home, at least. Of course, it's a not usual home, but it is a home. So I thought it would never be able to do it. And we everyone fought? You say no? Fight on the past. Fought. Everyone, like the production, the art designer, me, the assistant editor, the assistant director. I mean, it was a really, really tough day. And we decided to change some things on the set. but the fact that is that somehow it helped us, I think, because it gave us a sensation that every day it was a struggle. Every day we arrived there and had to go up the stairs, and only to pass through the stairs, and we already had this feeling that it's going to be a struggle to be in this place. And somehow this struggle, I think, is on the film.
There's just a small detail that the scenes where you see the workspaces of other artists are set in a different place, which is called barren, it's what in the film that space would be like, which is it's a candy factory that was deactivated like 20 years ago, and it was made into workspace for artists. So Julia had, I think, a good idea of where you wanted to get to, seeing that somehow, right?
Which was Barring 10 years before, because then Barring became a very fancy place with restaurants and stores, and so it's strange because it was Barring, but like 10 years before.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Yeah. Well, okay, I'll repeat it for people couldn't hear in the back. Well, at the end there was a compliment for the final sex scene in the film. But before that, there was a question about the supporting cast and all the various artist characters, and just could you talk about them and whether they're based on, I guess, like a real sociological phenomenon.
Yeah, in the beginning of the script, there was only both of them. And we started putting very slowly the other characters. But then there was one day that we went to Bering. Actually, it was a location research, because we were thinking about shooting the entire film there. And when we arrived there, Matthias was very impressed by the place, like thinking, oh, I only have seen it in Brooklyn, right? So does it exist here? We have to put it in the film. And we kind of decided to develop more the characters. And at the same time, for us, it was very important to give a feeling that the work of the actors, the work of the artists, is a work, a real work that we do it daily and daily, and there is no romanticization about it at all. So the supporters, actors, the supporters, characters, helped us to bring that feeling that somehow they were lost, somehow they were trying to, and they were not able to achieve the artists they were looking for.
And I think that we live in a group of friends that is somehow similar in ways from the characters. So I think that we had a good starting point of how to create those characters. And just going after what Julia said about the strength, the work quality of art, the kind of more sweat and physicality of the work. We saw a lot of films, with artists kind of to research it, and that portrayed the artist's work, and we didn't really like anything. We couldn't find something to inspire ourselves on. We really tried to, but we couldn't. And then Julia went to visit, some ateliers from artists like Nuno Ramos and Elisa Bracha, who's in the film, and I think that helped as well to kind of go for the actual thing and not for their artistic representation of it somehow.
We have time for a couple more questions. It's a question about the cable. I guess its function in the narrative, and maybe what its symbolic value, I guess.
Yeah, that changed a lot during the whole process of the film. So I will try to answer what I think now, which is completely different from what I thought during the script, what we thought during the script, because we kind of decided to cut everything out. there were a lot of explanations about the cable. They're not anymore in the film. So somehow for me, the cable means a secret that he has, and she's never able to pursue. She's never able to reach. Yeah, and that's more important than if it was a mental institute or why he went there and etc. On the last scene of the conversation, usually there was a huge explanation about the cable. And the whole idea was to bring to this scene in a very intense way that they were never able to talk about, so they could finally talk about only when they go out of the space and only when the relationship had ended, or at least had archived a very dead endpoint. But it didn't work. And it didn't work because somehow for us, as an spectators, it looked like it was an explanation of the film, not something that they were actually finally talking about. So it came with so many information at the end of the film, and had exactly the opposite force than it was intended to. So we decided to take it out. And I think it was very important for the film. It was actually, we took each time a little bit more. And the very last cut, we took all out. And I'm very glad we did it because of that. Because by the end, the most important thing is their relationship, and it's the fact that she's never able to reach his secret.
Just for the final question, I think we should talk about the visual dimension, just because I think you have some very clear, precise ideas about composition, color, and so on. So I would love to hear you talk about your collaboration with your cinematographer.
Soledad Rodriguez is an Argentinian cinematographer. She's very, very good, and it's weird because we didn't know each other before the film. We met. She arrived like 7 weeks before the shooting or something like that, when we were just starting the preparation, and she stayed like two weeks or something, and then she came back to Argentina and came back just for the shooting. So on the beginning of the shooting, we were still like finding ourselves. And on the beginning, she had a lot of light up. And I was always trying to say somehow, in a very delicate way, which I'm not very delicate, please use a little bit less than this. And she's incredible because she kind of pursued, she understood that I was looking for that. And she started to taking all the lights out and to look for more like a natural light, which is never natural. I mean, it's completely composited, but at the same time, I think the whole film works in this sense, like also the acting, and it's always playing with the fact that it is composed, but at the same time intended to look a little bit more natural. So it's this tension between both sides that I think we're looking for in every aspect of the film. And the cinematographer was very in this idea. And we choose we saw some films that for me was very important, which is basically Claire Denis films. And it's strange because I kind of organized all a very big decoupage of the film, looking for a film more similar to Claire Denis. But at the end, when we were trying to put all together in the editing, all this organized decoupage had fall apart. It's like the film doesn't look at all as a Claire Denis film, but it was what inspired me to to reach the image.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but thank you all. Yeah.